Jeffrey Epstein. The horrifying origin of Jeffrey Epstein.
All of America's top federal authorities find no evidence of collusion or conspiracy. There was no client list, no blackmail, nothing left behind at all. The banker who spent his career building a mysterious fortune while he managed money for billionaire clients that probably didn't exist, while also trafficking girls to and from a private island in the Caribbean at the same time as he hosted some of the world's foremost politicians.
Caribbean area? Come on, man. You can't do that to our Caribbean people, bro. What part Jamaican?
Businessmen, intellectuals, and celebrities as house guests, he had acted completely alone. It was all an unfortunate coincidence and nothing.
Got president.
The story of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, look at president.
Passed as the world kept turning.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
Or at least that's what the story would have been if there weren't already mountains and mountains of evidence of Epstein being not just a psychopath, but also at the center of a crime ring that involved the world's most powerful people, procuring victims for them to abuse together. Even now, with the federal government conflicting themselves and going back on their word in regards to his case, the controversy and mystery around Jeffrey Epstein has reached a fever pitch. Silence doesn't make it go away. It's only made the questions grow louder as people's trust in our leadership is turning to dust.
Chat, do you think Jeffrey Epstein is still alive to this day? Like, do you think he faked his death when he was in that prison cell? Because think about it. They said he couldn't see the camera and the camera was off, but they don't know where he's at. And why they didn't post his body or his funeral? Where he's at? Because think about it, somebody like that, they would still probably show his body at least. But nobody's saying nothing.
But in order to understand,
I bet he in
how
Puerto
Jeffrey
Rico or
Epstein was
somewhere
allowed
like
to
that.
happen, what made him the monster he was, we have to go all the way back
Like
to
a
the beginning,
demon.
before the island, before the fortunes, before the world knew his name. And we have to take a much closer look at his life and the system that enabled him.
Oh, hell no.
Jeffrey Epstein first appears in any public capacity in July of 1980 when he's 27 years old. But the context is very strange.
What?
There's an article I found from Cosmopolitan magazine where he was listed as Bachelor of the Month with a tiny blurb and a black and white photo next to it. It says, financial strategist Jeffrey Epstein talks only to people who make over $1 million a year. If you're a cute Texas girl, write this New York dynamo at 55 Water Street, 49th floor, New York, blah, blah, blah. Because for the first 20 years of his career, Epstein garnered only occasional and brief mentions in the press. He had no real public recognition at all in the way that most high-level bankers might. And that's because there wasn't really a sensible explanation as to how he got there in the first place.
So if that was like his pitch to start start trafficking, like start, building up a little, ritual, like a group following that have like, oh, because he's rich, he only talk to people that's make millions of dollars a year. And then, I don't know, I'm yapping, chat.
Jeffrey Edward Epstein, born in Brooklyn in 1953, was the son of two working-class Jewish parents who, by all accounts, were completely normal.
He's Jewish too? What's with Jewish people be so rich? Like, okay.
His mother, Pauline, worked a full-time job as a teacher's assistant while raising the kids, and his father worked for the City of New York's Parks Department as a gardener. Former friends and neighbors would use words like simple, humble, and gentle when talking about Epstein's parents, his brothers, and even Jeffrey himself.
Okay.
One former neighbor would later write that he was a nerdy little boy. People said that he was smart, overweight, always smiling, but mostly quiet. In high school, Epstein liked algebra and calculus, and he was on the math team, but his teammates would later describe him as not sticking out all that much. But he was smart enough to graduate high school in 1969, 2 years early, and he would...
Oh, 2 years early? So he was a smart motherfucker too, huh?
Then attend Cooper Union College, a very small school in Manhattan, known for offering completely free tuition. He studied math there, although after 2 years he transferred to NYU, but he ended up leaving there after 3 years without any college degree at all. But within 2 months, Epstein had picked up a full-time job anyway. He'd become a high school math teacher, not just at any school, but at one of the most prestigious in Manhattan, a school for the children of the elites. The students were the children of...
What was that? What was that? In my ear. Play it again?
The most prestigious in Manhattan, a school for the children of the elites.
Hey, that little sound right there make it more spookier. school for kids. Oh, I don't know. Hold on.
Students were the children of highly paid bankers, developers, politicians, people that could afford to pay a tuition equal to $50,000 a year today. By the time he started teaching
the
at
fuck?
Dalton, Epstein was almost a completely different person. Basically, as a teacher, Jeffrey Epstein was a sleazy scumbag and a bit of a disaster. In the mid-1970s, students at one of New York's most esteemed prep schools were surprised to encounter a new teacher who pushed the limits of the school's strict dress code, wandering the halls in a fur coat, gold chains, and an open shirt that exposed his chest. But it wasn't just a willingness to dress provocatively, it was how he interacted with students that left an impression on many of them for decades after. He was apparently popular among female students, as many young teachers might be, but the problem was that he not only embraced the attention, but also seemed to have chased after it. The story goes that at one point, he even started showing up at students' parties, including ones where they would have been drinking underage. But before this private school teacher in his mid-20s could ever get involved in something that might implicate him in a serious way, Epstein was fired from the Dalton School for performance issues. He simply wasn't a good teacher. But at the same time, though, he was able to move his career in a way that I could only describe as failing upwards.
So, okay. Y'all should saw as a sign that he's dressed. He's not in dress code. Two, he wants some validation from some young high schoolers. And three, he's showing up to birthday parties for the students as a grown ass man and as a teacher. You don't find that weird? You have some type of relationship with your students? I found that type of way too weird for me. But I don't know. That's an ice on the cake chat right there. And nobody saying nothing back then. Nah. He just little
Because
weird.
if you fast forward about 20 years, Epstein was no longer this sort of aimless college dropout who had a reputation for being a bit of a creep towards students at the school he worked at.
Yeah,
It was almost as if Epstein would go on to become a completely, literally different person. When you look deeper at how exactly Epstein goes from this disgraced school teacher to flying a jetliner around the world while he rubs elbows with the rich and famous, the puzzle pieces don't really fit together. It would only be a few months after getting fired from the Dalton School in 1976 until Epstein found another job. Specifically, he got hired at the giant investment firm Bear Stearns as an assistant to a floor trader. And it's the second time he did that in just a couple of years. Because if he did do one thing right while working at Dalton, it was impress his students' rich and powerful parents.
Specifically, he was hired off the recommendation of a student's parent he had impressed who also happened to be friends with Alan Greenberg.
Okay, so since he's had some relationship with the rich niggas, okay, let me stop talking niggeries. So he had some type of connections with the rich people that he worked at the school, and even though he was a weirdo, but his family, even though he was a weirdo, the student parents still liked him. And he was likable towards them. I mean, likable enough that they wanted him to work for them. And then that's all how it starts. All this weirdness.
Greenberg, CEO of the bajillion-dollar Bear Stearns investment bank.
Quadrillion?
Greenberg was also known for coming from a working-class background, and he liked to hire people with what he called PSD degrees. Poor, smart, and desperate to be rich. Whether or not getting his foot in the door was his original goal while working at a private school, whatever it was, Epstein had launched himself up the ladder in a massive way.
And it's kind of weird,
Do you think he
but
sucked his
Epstein's
dick?
What?
time at this giant financial services firm, it wasn't all that different from his time as a teacher. Within just 4 years there, he gets promoted from junior assistant to limited partner, which is a pretty crazy trajectory for someone with no college degree. But then, just a year after that, he was actually asked to quit or be fired during an SEC investigation into insider trading at Bear.
Wait, what? How y'all give him some years later and then he said, hey, y'all gotta quit or fire him? What did he do? What, because he was not qualified? How's that?
Stearns. But for the rest of the 1980s, he would start or get involved in a strange series of businesses that, if we didn't know they existed, kind of sound made up. Probably the strangest out of everything he did during this time was Towers Financial Corporation, a collection agency that was in the business of buying consumer medical debt. While he was hired as a consultant and paid the equivalent of $69,000 a month today, the first job he was given was to start using the company as a raiding vessel for corporate takeovers. In the 80s, there was this popular practice of buying a large stake in a corporation, then firing top executives, and then downsizing even further to increase the share value before selling. Basically, you take over and ruin a company just to make money from it. And their
That sounds like some Monopoly type shit.
first move was to attempt a takeover of a kind of old, declining airline, Pan American World Airways, in 1987. A year later, they also tried to take over Emery Air Freight. And while both attempts failed, that wasn't the problem. The
What's the
problem
problem?
is that they were using money they didn't actually have. Basically, while this company was claiming to be a debt collection agency, they had also raised $500 million from investors while promising big returns. They used the money
Wow.
on private jets, fancy houses, expensive cars, and their plan for paying it all back was to attempt those crazy corporate takeovers that were
A
supposed to make
Bentley?
enough profit to cover everything. But then when the takeovers failed, they had nowhere to turn, no money to repay the investors, and it all fell apart. And
So they make a fake money out of thin air. They was taking money and buying bullshit, then investing into stuff. So it was basically using fake money, buying poor bullshit that does not have to do anything with their business, and then now they get in trouble because they now wasn't using it for the right things.
So in 1993, Towers Financial would implode after being exposed as one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history. But when it came time for his former business partner, Stephen Hoffenberg, to be deposed and tell his side of the story in court, he didn't just throw Epstein under the bus, he basically blamed the whole thing on him. But by the time the company collapsed and was being investigated, Epstein had already been gone for 3 years. He would never be charged with anything related to Towers Financial. Meanwhile,
What?
his business partner Hoffenberg, he would spend nearly 20 years in prison. I don't think we have an exact reason why
Why?
Epstein was never charged for being on the inside of one of the biggest Ponzi schemes ever. One explanation is that Hoffenberg could have been lying. His testimony during his case was considered kind of generally unreliable. He would lie about a lot of stuff, wouldn't tell the truth. Another reason is that if Epstein was never really on the record as being deeply involved in the fraud, because apparently they didn't use his name for the trades or whatever it was, it's just hearsay. You know, we can't really prove that he's involved in the scam, so it's not worth pursuing if they did have Hoffenberg right in front of them and they could just punish him. However, another person would later write that it was only because of lazy prosecution that Epstein walked away, and that he was definitely involved as far as anyone can tell.
So that's how he didn't get in trouble, because he walked away before his stuff got. His name's right there. Jesus Christ, his name's right there. Hold
Especially
on.
because it's well recorded that during the peak
See, right
of the
there.
Towers Financial scam,
His name right
Epstein
there.
was physically accompanying Hoffenberg around the world on his jet. He was meeting with investors. He was with him a lot of the time. And that's because somehow, after walking away from a moderately high-paying consultant job and apparently having nothing to do with the hundreds of millions of dirty money they made, he somehow pops up again a couple years later, completely reinvented, like his old self never existed at all. But the idea that Epstein's career is just kind of a story about failing upwards, like I mentioned earlier, that doesn't even really explain how he ends up where he did. Yeah, a teacher at a rich private school might get hired by one of his students' rich parents, okay? But 15 years later, walking away unscathed from one of the worst financial crimes in American history, I mean, seriously, most of us probably don't remember, but Towers Financial was absolutely horrible. Even
Nigga like young boy, he got plot armor because he's low key smart. He was them nerds niggas, and I'm not gonna lie, nerds just sound just like him can take over the world. Remember, nerds are the rich people, not the hood niggas, not the cool guys. Nerds taking over this world, chat. Remember that.
back at that point in his life, a lot of his situations sound like a conspiracy. But of course, that's only one of these really odd stories that have been told about Epstein's careers over the years that imply all these different truths about how he ended up where he did. Multiple people over the
How,
years,
though?
journalists, friends, business partners, they all recalled Epstein suggesting or hinting that he worked for an intelligence agency, although he
Okay.
never specified which one. But in the mid to late 80s, during the same time he was working at Towers Financial, he also worked with Adnan Khashoggi, the Saudi businessman with ties to the CIA and Mossad, who is best known for being the middleman in transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran during the Iran-Contra affair.
Whoa.
Add on to that the fact that Epstein was later found to have a fake Austrian passport with multiple stamps from the Middle East. It only further paints a very confusing picture about Epstein's career. There just isn't a normal, sensible conclusion to this part of Epstein's life.
So what, okay, Chad, what do this man do to become a billionaire? Like, literally, he don't have no skills. Every job he gets is either a fire or the company just goes in shambles. But somehow, in some way, that he's into another job and also in a better position than he was last time. And he's not facing no consequences. And y'all don't think this guy is not alive right now? I 100%, not 100%. I got percent of chance. I feel like he's somewhere around. Where? I don't know. Probably in Puerto Rico. He's alive. Allegedly, but I don't know.
Even after connecting all the dots, it still doesn't make sense. He starts
What
off
you
by
mean?
dropping out of college without getting his degree, only to get hired at a prestigious school that he then gets fired from for being a bad teacher, only to then
See?
get hired at a hugely prestigious investment firm that he also then gets fired from, only to
See?
then end up getting implicated in one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history that
And
he
then goes in
somehow never
shambles.
faces a single charge for being involved in. Along the way, he acquires fake passports, he does business with arms dealers in the Middle East, and at the end of all of it, he's filthy rich. At every single turn, you see him get not punished, but actually rewarded for stealing, cheating, and lying. But the craziest part of
Yeah.
all of that is that that was just the beginning.
He got plot armor. Like I just said earlier, and like he just said, he didn't achieve nothing but got rich. He got like young boy plot armor.
In the late 80s, Epstein forms a new company, Epstein & Co., a wealth management firm where he establishes immediately that he's not going to take any clients with a net worth of under $1 billion.
It was around the time that Epstein launched Epstein & Co., his investment services company, that his life kind of just seems to completely change all over again for what feels like the 100th time in a row. By the early 90s, he's moving like someone who's in charge of an empire. He's flying around the world in
See
a
that
giant
face?
jetliner. He's acquiring
Check.
back
Look at his
someone
face.
who's in charge of an empire.
That's a demon, chat. Ain't gonna lie. Right there. That's a demon. That right there is a monster. And y'all, I don't know. Is that Michael Jackson? Oh no, I'm about to say I'm about to be tight. But that right there is a monster right back there. He's alive.
He's flying around the world in a giant jetliner. He's acquiring massive properties around the US, but at the same time, his name never shows up in Forbes. He has no public filings, no client list, no office, but to the people around him, it looks like he owns the world. By the late 90s, Epstein's doing what I could only describe as flying too close to the sun. He's friends with Donald Trump, the Prince of England, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He even buys a literal island, where after a series of conspicuous stunts, one of which was a trip to Africa on his private plane with
Well, it's a Bill Clinton, Donald Trump flew in Chris Tucker to Africa in a private jet. Chris Tucker, you got some explaining to do. Bill Clinton.
Kevin Spacey as passengers, it gets to a point where Epstein is too big to ignore. The media, the general public, people are wondering how Epstein made all this money, where he came from, what's the point of everything he does.
He laundering
How
money,
he got
bro.
to this level of social status is yet another strange story in this never-ending list of strange stories. And a big part of it would be this very, very strange story of his connection to the Maxwell family media empire. Robert Maxwell was born Ian Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hawk. He was a media tycoon businessman with a really strange life. After the war, he changes his name to Robert Maxwell, moves to England, and gets elected into the British Parliament. But he also quickly starts building a media empire across Europe at the same time.
Okay.
Over a period of around 50 years, he ends up owning the Daily Mirror. He owns part of MTV in Europe, the London Daily News. At one point, he even buys the US-based Macmillan Publishers for over $2 billion in the late 80s. But throughout his life, he was also
You know how much money he had to have? You know how rich this nigga is? They had that much money in the 1980s? $2 billion? They definitely do some laundering, bro.
Also closely linked to Israeli intelligence. Point being, though, is that one of Robert Maxwell's 9 children, Ghislaine, had long been a prominent socialite in London and New York, and after her father died and the family empire collapses in the early 90s, she ends up living in Manhattan, where she would end up dating none other than Jeffrey Epstein.
Of course.
Notably, Ghislaine, the daughter of this internationally known billionaire spy for Israel, would become the primary link between Epstein and his powerful social network. Out of many things she would do for him, she would be the person who introduces him to Prince Andrew, Saudi royals, celebrities, politicians. Of course, Epstein was already pretty well connected, but his relationship with Maxwell was pivotal in him inserting himself into the upper echelon of society.
In March of 2003, Vanity Fair journalist Vicky Ward sets out to write a profile about Jeffrey Epstein and figure out what exactly he's all about once and for all.
Lately, Jeffrey Epstein's high-flying style has been drawing oohs and ahs. The bachelor financier lives in New York's largest private residence, claims to only take billionaires as clients, and flies celebrities like Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey on his Boeing 727. But Pierce's air of mystery, and the picture changes. And her point was that, after peeling back his mask of mystery, something far more alarming than anticipated would be revealed. Her research led her to question the idea that Epstein made all of his money with an exclusive and private investment firm where he'd only take on billionaires as clients.
I think he's money laundering, chat. Low key, think about it. You know what? I'm sorry, I pause. I gotta give out one point. I think he's money laundering to get, like, cause there's no way he's doing something. I ain't like, he might be doing witchcraft or something. I don't know. Some black magic, I don't know. I know that only black people do that in Caribbean areas, but in Africa. But yeah, but he's doing something that's unhuman. He's just doing something that's not realistic, and he just like breaking like reality. Like he got like a power or something? Cause there's no way he should. I know he's smart, but there's no way he should be this rich from just glazing and dick sucking these rich niggas this much. That's the only thing I know. He must be taking dick. That's the only thing I can say to how he got to this level.
What?
Clients. She suggests that Leslie Wexner is the only client Epstein ever had, but even more than that his business isn't really how he made his money at all. What she found made it look like Epstein really wasn't a genius investor at all, but probably acquired the majority of his mysterious fortune from the Tower's financial Ponzi scheme, which he was far more involved in than the official story would suggest. She essentially made him look like a fraud, a con man with no substantial investing history, hiding behind the persona of an elite financial mastermind while building up a social network to make him look a lot more sophisticated than he really was. It's even worse than what they did publish about him is what they didn't.
What? Oh, that was a good video. What the fuck? Bro, come on. I gotta watch this on my own. It's an hour long. I don't watch this on my own. But make sure you leave a like on this man video. Make sure you leave a like. But I think Epstein, he's too smart. I think the best way to disappear is fake your death. I think he's smart. He got this smart enough to make billions of dollars. I'm pretty sure you know what he's doing, bro. He's smart. He's around somewhere, but I'm not looking for him. Y'all look for that guy. I just want to see who's in the Epstein file. That's all it. That's it. But yeah.